never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.
Welcome to another episode of the NRL Allstars podcast. This is Barnesy, your host, here for another team preview episode in the preseason. And this week we have the Cronulla Sharks. So big fans in the Shire of the podcast. Shout out to everybody. Really appreciate it. And for this one, we have a huge Cronulla Sharks fan, the head of content for Australia for Sporting News Australia, Chris Danks. Chris, welcome aboard, mate.
Thank you for having me. Such a big fan that I almost got a Sharks 2016 premiership tattoo.
Wow.
Yeah,
it would have been even more impressive if you got it, because then you could have showed everyone.
Well, truth be told, I was going to get it, but I was getting married the next week, and then I was going diving on my honeymoon. That's the only reason that stopped me. And I wanted to get a big one as well, because it was the greatest moment of my life. So I've only just avoided it, but hopefully this year we get another.
Well, I hope so too. I am a Roosters fan, as everybody knows, but Sharks are kind of a secondary team at the bottom of my heart, because I have been a born and bred Shire boy, so had to sort of like them a little bit. So I was quite chuffed that they did get their first premiership, but it did take a while. So, I mean, I guess you could have said to your wife, look, it's okay. I'm only probably going to get one in my lifetime based on averages.
Exactly.
Well, look, we're here to talk about the Cronulla Sharks, and we're here to talk about it for SuperCoach. But a lot of real life comes into it as well there. Now, we need to talk about how their roster's shaken up for the 2026 season. And I guess glass half full, positive approach would be it's a very settled roster, because they've done nothing as far as gains. So they brought in no players at the moment. And, you know, for a roster that's really a top four type of team, I guess you could say that's a positive, because they haven't really lost much. Daniel Atkinson's gone, and he's probably the biggest loss. He's filled in, but he's been depth. And obviously a lot of the narrative around the league, but also in the media as well, is probably that the Sharks need to take the next step now. They've got a few years under Fitzgibbon. The roster has been settled. They had big signings that they needed, like Fanua Blake coming in for last season. And really, now it's time to deliver on that. And they're probably run out of time, really. So to me, I sort of see the roster as really solid, with the holes being that with Atkinson going in particular, and with a lack of guys in the reserves, I guess, that can come in and fill in, it does present a few issues. They do have Militalo out probably until June, Cam McInnes out probably until about 2 months into the season. And because of that, you know, you get Stone Street that's probably going to come up. You've still got Hiroti there for another year, but really a lot of guys that don't have experience. So I guess you could look at the roster movements two different ways, couldn't you, Chris?
Definitely. I mean, even if you want to go to backup fullbacks with Kay Dykes going to the Dogs, but then Liam Eisen comes in fresh off his ACL from last year. Hopefully he actually plays this weekend in the reserves. I'm a little bit buoyed by the Sharks' lack of recruitment. I didn't want them to go out and pay overs for a utility, and I hope Atkinson goes wild at the Dragons, but that's what he was at Cronulla. I think there are options, especially with the new rules, which can cover for him. Stone Street comes in for Ronnie as close as you can. Even Cam McInnes, who, you know, whether you're in St George, Cronulla or anywhere, everyone loves that handsome oaf. I think Cronulla have an excellent option in Jesse Colquhoun. So
yes,
I actually quite like the makeup of the roster. You are right that if there is something to pull apart, it's probably the backs. Michael Gabriel would probably be your cover in the centres if Iro and Ramian don't fire. But overall, second year of AFB coming in, hopefully Blake Brayley continues on the incredible level that he set last year. I think there's a lot to like with the Cronulla Sharks.
Yeah, I do too. And look, if they don't get any bad injuries early in the season, it won't really matter too much, and I think that they're fine. It's just that a tiny issue with their depth that they've got at the moment. But in saying that, you know, there is some guys that are under pressure that kind of need to perform, and we all know the contract year motivation that rugby league players get more than probably any other sport, it seems. And Jesse Ramian's sort of gotten the tap on the shoulder, and there was talks that he might move to the Cowboys off-season anyway, and he's kind of in the in the last year of his career at Cronulla if he doesn't really step up and earn another contract. And I think that's a good thing. And when you look at the off-contract guys, like there is a few, even guys like Billy Burns played really well last year, but Will Kennedy, another big one. Obviously, fullback's such an important position now. And I think the Sharks could only just scrape together enough to give him that 1-year deal that he got. So, they don't really have a ready-made fullback that's going to be able to step in either. So they kind of need Will Kennedy and they need him to perform, and Will Kennedy needs the Sharks too, unless he wants to maybe move over to the Bears or something. So there is those few guys. Even Sifa Talakai, who's sort of had a mortgage there, is in the final year of his contract as well in 2026. So there's a lot of guys that are kind of under a bit of pressure to perform, also in contract years as well. And normally in rugby league, that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I think so. Just on Kennedy as well, Will Kennedy gets a lot of stick from Cronulla fans, where they'd like a more creative fullback. But what Kennedy does allow the Sharks is, and I think he'd be offended by me saying this, he's a bit of a cut price option for Cronulla. They spend a lot on their halves, they spend a lot on their forwards, as they well should. AFB came in, just got a huge amount of cash. Kennedy gets unders as a fullback, and all right, he is not having the try assists or maybe the creativity of someone who's in the upper echelon of fullbacks, but the Sharks also can't afford that. There has to be someone at some point who takes a little bit less in potentially a stopgap role, because as you said, Liam Eisen, although huge raps on him, is unproven at the NRL level.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that I 100% agree with you with Kennedy, and I kind of have had this discussion sometimes, reasonably heated discussion at times about Will Kennedy, because it's also kind of about fit as well. Like you can't have three guys with massive usage, right? And it's a problem for Nico Hynes already because he's the star and he's the playmaker, but Braden Trindle already gets in the way sometimes. And if you've got those two guys already, and then you have this massive ascension of Brayley, who in the second half of the season when he went on that form run was getting bulk attack. He scored no tries in the first half of the season, 3 tries in the run home, all these assists that he was getting. And if you've got all these 3 of these 4 guys in your spine doing that, the fourth guy can't. He's got to be a complementary piece. And Will Kennedy works out great. Unfortunately, we're kind of in an era where people think that if you're a fullback and you can't do everything, that you're no good, when there's a massive place for it in particular teams for you to actually fill your role correctly. And the Sharks have got that in Kennedy. Like if you put guys at fullback that are much more talented, like even a Latrell Mitchell, for example. Like I think if you put Latrell Mitchell in Cronulla, it would be great, but at the same time it would present massive problems because Latrell doesn't do a lot of work. He doesn't, back up and score off the back of stuff. He kind of has the ball in hand to create stuff, and that doesn't work with the other guys on Cronulla's spine. So, yeah, I think that he gets a bad rap. I agree it's massive unders as well, and I do think. And this comes into the next part of the show at the start where we talk about where they're going to finish. I do think that the Sharkies have got a good enough team to be a top 4 side as they stand. So to me, I've got them their range anywhere from sort of 3 to 8. And I don't think that they can miss out on the finals myself. And some people will say that's quite bold. You probably haven't seen the last few episodes, but I've had these massive ranges for teams, right? Like I've been like, they could finish from 6 to 14, and we talked about teams like the Dragons and things in those instances. The Sharkies, I've got them locked in for finals. It's just a matter of whether they finish top 4 or not for me.
So I'm actually quite specific on mine. I do think 3rd to 5th. Now, why not 3rd to 6th? 3rd to 5th sounds more specific. You're really talking a matter of points difference by then. They've been in back-to-back prelims. I was down there in Melbourne for that loss in the prelim. First half, they were losing 10-8, and then Munster puts the kick through in the 35th minute. Pappenhausen flies through. Kennedy, unfortunately, was caught out of position. And from there, the Sharks just couldn't come back. But up until that point, they were the better side. Now, they don't have the consistency yet that we've seen to match it with your Penrith, even on a bad day, your Storm, the Roosters. I'm quite bullish on the Roosters this year, but I don't think they're going to be, they fall down as far as like the Dolphins, Manly, who I think will go better this year. Bulldog, I think they're probably about where the Bulldogs are. So I like 3rd to 5th. It is the 5th year now of Tricky and Nico. I saw a lot of things at the end of last year, or especially the Canberra game, where it really felt like they'd worked out who was doing what. I don't think they have a shared responsibility. As you say, sometimes when Nico takes control and it feels like Tricky just stands there in front of him, so that they're not perfect yet, but when they're good, they are one of the form halves in the NRL. So third to fifth.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I would, if I had to put money on it, I'd put money on them in that sort of range. And look, the Trindle stuff, it's funny. I think there's so many Sharks fans that have a love-hate relationship with Trindle, and
Yeah.
I'm not a Sharks fan. I love Nico Hynes. I find Trindle incredibly frustrating. I thought the year before last, at the back end of that 2024 season, which lo and behold was a contract time, but people were talking about him, especially some really big media pundits, and I can't remember. I don't want to say it was like Gus Gould because I'm not sure, but there were certainly several big, high-profile media guys that were saying he's $1 million player. And I was just so surprised, and I was like, Cronulla needs to not go with that hype just because he's played well for 6 weeks, because anybody who's watched Trindle has these runs. And I had these discussions with so many people at the time, right, that, you're talking about this run, but he's had these runs before for a few weeks, and he's found himself in reserve grade and dropped a month later. This is the Trindle journey. This is a Trindle roller coaster, and he's always kind of been the same guy. He started to play a little bit better than what he used to a few years ago, a little bit more consistent, and learn his role a little bit better next to Nico. But he's still a wild card for me, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's a real make or break relationship for the Cronulla Sharks season in how well Braden Trindle can go. And everybody says it's Nico Hynes, but Hynes is going to be Hynes. He's a superstar. But how well can Braden Trindle, how well can Trindle allow Hynes to play that well and help the Sharks as a secondary playmaker?
So it was Joey Johns, and it was 900K.
There we go, Joey.
It just stuck with me because I must have read the story 30 times, and I'm like, that has to be a misprint. There's no way he's a 900K half. And I love Tricky, but he's just not, with the greatest respect, mostly down to consistency, which you spoke about. I had if this is a bit of a tangent, but I had a somewhat interesting conversation with Blake Austin last night, who I do a podcast with, who was at the Raiders for a long time, and he was talking about Atkinson at the Dragons, and he thinks it's such a good decision that Flano came out really early and said, Atco's our half. He took all the pressure off his son, Kyle, but there's no expectation now that Kyle's going to be the controlling game half. I would love if Fitzy would swap the roles. And so all that pressure is then going on Tricky's shoulders. You're our half. You manage the game. This is what you do. Nico creates. They kind of do that anyway, but I'd love to hear it verbalized by Fitzy. Does he know better than I do? Potentially. But that is definitely what I would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I put myself in Fitzgibbon's shoes, I would be scared knowing that Trindle can be a confidence type of guy. That, oh no, Nico Hynes is never going to get the ball again because I've just told Trindle he's got the license.
Exactly.
So maybe there's a little bit of that there. But let's have a look at their draw before we go into some SuperCoach players of interest as well. The draw is a bit of a funny one because, in SuperCoach, it's really about the first 2-month blocks. It's the first 4 weeks and the second 4 weeks, because we're talking about guys that you can start with round one. A few months into the season, you can get rid of a lot of these guys and everything and do trades. It's fine. But you're going to start off needing to score some decent points. And the Cronulla Sharks probably have arguably the best matchup that they could have to start with the Gold Coast Titans round one at Shark Park. Now, we say on all these podcasts, before everybody starts replying and putting up this point, yes, we know at the start of the season, everybody thinks their team's good. And look, all the teams are better at the start of the season. There's no injuries really. They're up for it. They're not fatigued. It's round one. They all think they can win. That's all granted. But I would certainly say that everybody would say I'd rather play the Titans than the Melbourne Storm round one. So it is a good matchup. No matter how you slice it, it's a good matchup. And it's at Shark Park, and that's what you want. So we've got this prime SuperCoach matchup because these Gold Coast Titans Sharks games put up a lot of points, and points are great for SuperCoach. But then they go away to Carrington Park to play Penrith. And then they've got the Dolphins at home. Now, the Dolphins aren't a bad matchup because even though they are a very good side, and I think they'll probably have a good shot at the 8 this year, they do give up a lot of points. And then they're away at GIO. Now, GIO Stadium, it's a tough trek, but the Sharks have actually done decent against the Raiders in recent seasons. 2 games at home, Warriors and the Roosters before they have a round 7 bye. Now, I think that when you look at that, and even not just from a SuperCoach lens, you go, oh, yeah, I'm not unhappy about it, but it's also not phenomenal. But the bye probably comes at the right time because you've got the round 12 big bye round that the Sharks won't play. But that 4-game block there for super coaches is, I think, where you want to target. And it's also where I think the Sharks will go on their run. They've got the Cowboys, the Tigers, South Sydney, and the Bulldogs. Now, certainly South Sydney could improve this year, but I still think that they're, again, not playing one of the top sides there. And the Cowboys and Tigers can potentially give up a lot of points. And we are getting towards that mid-season point where sides are starting to get a bit weary. The bottom sides, the non-top 8 sides are starting to get points put on them again. And it's a really nice run in that middle period. So, I mean, I guess if I were to talk about the draw in general, Chris, I reckon that the Gold Coast game's a great one to start with. It then gets a bit harder. But if you weather that storm, the Sharkies have got a pretty good midsection there before the round 12 bye.
I couldn't agree more. When I was looking at the draw when it came out in November, I was just thinking if the Sharks could go into the bye at 4-2 or maybe even, I'd be pretty happy with that. Obviously, Panthers, Raiders, Wilds, Roosters, all tough games. The Dolphins, you just never know. It could be 50-10. Or it could be 45-45. Obviously, they should beat the Titans. My just overall looking at the draw, because it is a great draw for Cronulla, my only concern is that their third bye is used and done between Origin 2 and 3, which I believe is around 17.
Yes.
That is a long run to the finals. I don't know how they will manage that. I don't think they'll be coming in particularly fresh. I don't know if they're going to try to just absolutely run the table early on. You try to win every game, but it's really going to be a tough finish to the year for the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks.
Yeah, I think that two key things with that run home on that draw. One of them is they're going to have the benefit of having some superstars back. So Ronnie's going to be back at that point, which will take a bit of pressure off, say, a Stone Street having the longer season in his career. And then also, Ed McInnes is also going to take a bit of pressure off those middle forwards, including Calhoun, who at that point, I think, again, it'll be his first season starting. A couple of months in, he'll start to be feeling it a bit more. And then, McInnes will help a bit with that on the run home. So they do have that probably going for them. For SuperCoach, SuperCoaches just want everyone running to the ground minutes-wise. It is a player of interest. So that run home's great because you don't want anyone on a bye on the run home. You want to just be able to keep those stars and keep playing them every single week. And you'll be able to do that with the Sharkies, which is at least a positive. But yeah, it will be interesting how the wins change on that run home because the final third of the season, I do think that they've actually got a pretty good run of matchups. The Storm in the last round and from 19 onwards is the only side aside from the Raiders that actually made the 8 last year. So from 19 to 27, there's only 2 top 8 teams from last season. Not bad, but again, they could be quite weary. We need to talk about some players, Chris. So let's talk about them.
Yep.
The first player of interest for SuperCoach is the Sharkies' number 1 player, and that is Nicho Hynes. So Hynes cost $749,000 in SuperCoach, which is expensive. He was very consistent last year. So prior to last season in 2024, he had a 75 average. He put that up to a 77 in 2025. So pretty consistent. It wasn't the heights of the 95 or 85 points per game the 2 years before that he was doing. So points-wise, he has gone down, but he has settled into that mid to high 70s type of guy. And that's what you're paying for. That's elite SuperCoach points, so you shouldn't mind paying that money for him. I guess the couple of things that are a worry for him, it's a positive that he's got a 47-point floor in his scoring, but 34 base power is not good numbers. He needs to be involved more, basically. He needs to run the ball more. And if he runs the ball more, he tends to get the tackle breaks and the offloads that'll score better. His only saving grace with his sort of floor scoring is that he's got 13 points per game net in his goal kicking, which if he lost his goal kicking, you just wouldn't be interested in him at the moment. All of his numbers are really held up in SuperCoach by his goal kicking and his playmaking. He had assists in every game last year bar 2, so 22 out of 24 games he had at least a line break assist, if not a try assist. And that was after his base power stats, so his runs, tackles, offloads, tackle breaks dropped about 7 points per game year on year the last couple of years. So really, all that sort of says in a numbers-wise, it actually reflects really well in real life. The Sharkies need Nicho to get his hand on the ball more, run more, score more tries, try and take the line on, and get more involved because he's already getting a lot of attacking stats without getting as involved as what I think everybody would want him to. If he can do that, he might even be a little bit undervalued in SuperCoach. But at the same time, if he just did what he did last year, it's still going to be a good season for him.
I think last year's a really good barometer of probably how he's going to end up this year. Cronulla had a real problem with overcalls for a long time that Tricky would just, as we probably said before, Tricky would just call for it every single time. When they have ruck speed, which is probably Brayley's great strength at the moment, Hynes is the number one option for him. And I think they've figured that out because his feet is his strength, especially when he's going left. So I don't think that would particularly change. Obviously, his goal kicking's pretty good, but I don't think we're going to go back to the years where it was Tricky just calling for it inside their own 40 with nothing going on. I think they've very much figured out who does what. So last year would be a good barometer.
Yeah, that's going to really help him. And it's funny that you say that too, because there's actually some numbers to back that up. So look, you're talking like a veteran here, because
Feel it.
the numbers on the run home in SuperCoach, he averaged 90 points per game, Hynes, between round 19 and 27. I don't think it's any coincidence that coincided with Trindle clicking a bit better, but also Brayley's ascension into what he was doing. And sometimes, certainly in SuperCoach, you worry that a key guy in the spine has this big uptick in his performances and attacking stats because you're like, oh, that's going to take away from the others. What Brayley did reflects in the numbers that it was actually better for everybody else. Hynes actually played better off the back of what Brayley was doing on the run home. So I actually see it as a real positive if Brayley can continue, that it will help Hynes' form immensely. And even if he meets halfway, like if it's not 90 points per game, which would be elite and near the best SuperCoach player in the game, it could very well be an 85. And then all of a sudden it's still 8 points better than what you paid for his 2025 average. And I could see that happening. But I think that the key is as well with starting with Nicho Hynes in round one, which is what people are going to be deciding. They're going to be deciding between a Nathan Cleary and a Nicho Hynes. There's almost 100K or odd price difference between the two. I do think that round one is already a captaincy option for SuperCoach, so double points for Hynes against the Gold Coast Titans. And that could be a really fast start. But it's going to be a big decision because I think SuperCoaches are choosing between Hynes and Cleary if they want an elite half. And it's all going to come down to which one's going to start better out of the two.
Yeah.
And it's a big decision.
Who do slightly off topic, who do the Panthers have round one?
Well, it's a good comparison point. And when you're looking at Cleary away versus the Broncos. So last year's premiers looking to defend at Suncorp Stadium. And then they've got Cronulla round two, funnily enough. So it's not a great first few weeks, really, for the Panthers. And we discussed this on the Panthers podcast. You know, Cleary goes Broncos away, Sharks at home, Roosters away, Para at home, Storm at home, Dogs away. So you potentially got the top four teams maybe in that run for Penrith aside from the Panthers. So it's I certainly think that Hynes wins on the draw front.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move along to the next guy on the list, and that is another SuperCoach gun in KL Iro. Iro is at 705,900. He had a career season last year in any way that you looked at it, really. The run of games that he had try scoring was unbelievable. He scored a try from round 1 to round 14 every single game, with one of them being a double. It was an amazing run, and it saw him average 79 SuperCoach points per game in that first third of the season. Now, he obviously had a pretty bad injury there. Round 15 through to round 26, he missed. Round 26, he returned for 2 games at the end. It was a great season, though, 72 points per game, up from his 65 points per game in his first full year of first grade in 2024. There's so much to like about Iro. He's going to give you just about a 50 base power. So he's got a great floor for scoring, which means anytime he scores a try, just one try, it catapults his scoring and his performance, which is why he had a 79 average between round 1 and 9. He just kept scoring. Now, I think what it comes down to with him, that SuperCoach is going to be paying a premium price. Okay, plus for a centre wing is a lot of money. But with the new SuperCoach scoring as well, there's also an argument that Iro is going to get the benefit of more try assists because he was getting a lot of last touches where he was just passing to the winger before. They're going to turn into try assist, line break assists. So there's an argument that he's got even more growth in his game. Even if his scoring of tries goes down a little, it won't really matter. I guess when you're looking at it, like we're going to talk Jesse Ramian later, Danksy, but Ramian's got 3 tries for last year. And then you've got somebody like Iro, who scored like every week until he got hurt mid-season. Is it going to can it possibly continue that way?
I think the Sharks have, I don't know if they've stumbled or they've engineered, but it's one of the prettiest plays I've seen in the NRL. It goes like this: a 20-meter line, right in front of the sticks. Brayley goes left to Tricky. They go across the face of Wilton, and with Kennedy out the back, they hit Iro close to the line. I'm yet to see anyone defend it. There's nothing crazy about it. It's a play that anyone can do, but they do it really well. Iro, like, remember when Britton Nikora, when he first came up when Sean Johnson was playing for Cronulla, and they just had this incredible thing about running lines. SJ knew exactly where he was. It feels to me like Tricky has a very similar relationship with KL Iro, because he just knows exactly where he is, throws up, puts on his chest. I don't see him slowing down at all. I don't know if he's going to do that, that length of the field try. I think he's got Souths last year, which was just insane and shows off his pure speed. But Iro's here to stay. He's the dominant centre. And I do wonder if he's going to get a little bit more ball now with no Ronnie on the right. I mean, Cronulla have always had, Katoa, who's fantastic, and Ronnie, so they've shared the load a little bit more. But I do think Katoa will get a little bit more this year, so surely Iro does as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I really like him. He's in my side at the moment, and even just for that, like, I think that he is one of the top players that is odds-on favourite to get a double round one. Like, against the Titans, he's such a good chance at scoring 2 tries against them. It's one of his better averages is against the Titans as well, with a 75 SuperCoach average. And it's just such a great matchup. But the good thing about Iro is that when you look at it, he's actually really consistent no matter who he plays. Like, he put 103 points on the Roosters last year, put 77 on the Storm. It didn't really matter who he played. He was just really good every game, and that's what I love about him, because we've got a lot of centre wings who, when you chuck them in your SuperCoach team, they might be good for that really good matchup, but when they're priced at $700K, you've got to play them every week, and you're going to play them the next week against a good matchup, and you're getting a really dud score. And with Iro, you don't get that. You're going to get a good score every week. And those weeks that he does score a try, it's going to be big. And when he does hit a double, which he will do, potentially round one, it could be a really fast start. So I like him as one of the top few centre wing options to pick from. And certainly, probably top 3 elite options for SuperCoach. And I reckon he's in for a career year again now that he's injury free. Brayley, talk about career years. 654,000. We'll just talk about the tale of two halves here, and it resonates pretty well for you as a Sharkies fan, because you would have noticed it in real life going to the games. 5 of his 13 games for the first half of the year were 60 plus, which means the majority of his games, almost 2/3 of his games, he wasn't even getting to 60 SuperCoach points. And half of them were actually sub 50. And if you've got a hooker that's doing so many tackles and playing 80 minutes in the middle, getting under 50 SuperCoach points, there's something wrong. Then on the run home, you look at it and go, well, what did he do on the final third of the season when he busted out? His average went up to 81 SuperCoach points per game, putting him as easily the best hooker, one of the best players. But the big thing was everyone talks about his attack. And certainly, he hadn't scored a try yet until that final third, and then he scored 3. And he did get some try assists in that run too on the run home. But his raw base, so his tackles and his runs, have gone up from 42.5 in the first half of the season to 48 in the second half of the season. So he got involved a lot more. And I think that was really evident, definitely in his running, but actually even in his tackles, he was getting involved a lot more. I just felt like he had a heap of confidence. And when you are a young guy like that, I think it's a lot easier to go on with that, because obviously the risk and the glass half empty approach to it will be, well, was this just a form run? Did he just have a really good run, and was it so good that it's hard to replicate? And, look, when you get a Dane Gagai do it at 33 or something, which has happened in the last few years, you go, well, that's going to be pretty hard to replicate. But when it is a guy in his mid-20s that's just hit his prime, that's been earmarked to do this for so long in Brayley, I just think that there's such a good chance that he just continues on with it. And I do believe in the next 2 years he'll overtake Harry Grant, and he'll be the best hooker in the game. For SuperCoach, I think that could be this year. It was his first 60-plus points per game year, 67 points per game. I think that he can meet that, if not exceed it. And I'll finish off, Chris, by saying the new scoring system with the NRL stats. The NRL gave Brayley significantly more tackles last year than what Fox Sports did. So, he's going to get credit for a lot more tackles than what he was before. So he could even be a 75-plus average this year if he continues that form. I guess for you as a Sharkies fan, do you see him continuing it, and will he still be so involved in the attack?
Being a defensive stalwart that's just Blake Brayley's game. If you ask anyone at Cronulla, you know how when you go to these open media days that all the players are up, you talk to them about defense, and it is Blake Brayley every time. Like, one of those people that still folds blokes in practice. He is like his technique is flawless. There's not a lot of him, but he will run through any forward. He's just great. So I just can't see that being affected. The thing about his attack, I had a theory last year, and I don't think it's correct, that his form spike was directly related to Adam Fanua-Blake offloading more, getting more ruck speed. Like, in my mind, it checks out, but I don't think it was as simple as that. I do think he took a lot more control of the actual game management. You saw even when he was 7, which he always does really well somehow, he still managed the game entirely on his own. I don't see there being a regression whatsoever. And I'm not saying that as a Sharks fan. I just think Blake Brayley is just building a new foundation. He's not going to go back to 2024. 2025 is his new floor. He's a special talent, I really think. And just a workhorse. Hates coming off the field. Poor Jaden Beryl, who's a fantastic player in his own right, just not playing any first grade.
Well, it's a great thing about the low risk in SuperCoach as well, that Fitzgibbon loves having a 4-forward bench, and Talakai will be used as that utility guy. And now that you've got the 6-man benches as well, like, they'll just put a half or something after that, and maybe even an outside back, like, or maybe they'll throw a hooker in, but they're not going to come in. It's just a mortgage on 80 minutes in the Fitzgibbon system. They're going to have 4 front rowers or 4 middle forwards, or Billy Burns maybe in there. I really like it for Brayley this year. I'm going to say that I think that he's actually got huge upside, because if he did what he did the second half of the year for a full season, he'll double his tries, he'll get more attack, and he'll be one of the top players in SuperCoach, and you're going to get that for maybe 100K less than his output's going to be. So there's actually value in getting the best hooker in the game right now in Blake Brayley for SuperCoach. So he outscored Harry Grant by 5 points a game last year. I think he's still going to do that. And a lot of people are going too cheap hookers, because there's a lot of guys that have moved clubs, like Reid Marnie, that are going to get a new opportunity, Robson and so forth. But I think that build's fine. But I also think it's fine if you want to spend up for Blake Brayley as your hooker 1 in SuperCoach. It's going to be a great year for him. AFB, you mentioned him. I think before I look at the numbers, just my gut feel of it was when he came into Cronulla, I had high expectations, and I thought that he was exactly what they needed. And then I thought maybe they overpaid a little bit because they didn't have a lot of money, but it was what they needed, someone like him. And then I just thought that he started slow. And I sort of felt that even at the end of the season, I kind of went, yeah, it was good, but probably didn't meet my expectations, which were quite high. And then when I looked at the SuperCoach numbers and his actual stats, he actually probably did better than what I gave him credit for. So I will give him that. I guess a 638,000 in SuperCoach is expensive, but the reason why I didn't notice him as much last year is really simple, and also what his SuperCoach output's going to come down to. It is purely minutes. And we mentioned that 4-forward bench that Fitzy has. That hurts him a little bit, but in real life, I think it helps him, because he was playing 54 minutes a game last year. The 2 years before at the Warriors, he's playing 60-plus minutes a game. That extra 6 minutes is big. It's big in curtailing his output. That's why he averaged 65 points a game instead of 72 or 73 the 2 years before. But when you look at his per-minute production, for 3 years, the 2 years at the Warriors and the 1 year at Cronulla, it has been on point exactly the same. His production per minute is identical. So all it comes down to in SuperCoach is minutes. I don't actually think he will get more, but I think that's better for Cronulla, because I do think that at 54 minutes a game, it keeps him fresh enough as a big body. It lets him attack a little bit. He still had a heap of tries last year, scoring 6 for the season for them. And he was also durable, which is important. The 24 games he played last year, that's an NRL career best for him. And I don't think it's any coincidence that he played, 10 to 12% less minutes and actually played the most games he's played in a season.
I couldn't agree more, especially on at the very start where you're saying about, was it not underwhelmed? That's too strong a term, but I thought AFB was fine. Going through the stats when preparing for our season launch stuff, I was very much the same in that I thought, actually, he was a leak, and that's what he does. I don't, just on the minutes, I think that's a really good point because the Sharks have a really good problem in that they've really settled on their rotation. In the 17 at the moment, you probably don't have Tom Hazelton, though I know Craig Fitzgibbon would love to. So if you're going to have...
I'm an unabashed Hazelton lover. I'm such a big fan. I did
Is...
the Sporting News predicted lineups and I had to put him in the 17. I just could not do it.
Where did you have him?
I had him at like 17.
Yeah.
And I had Kafusi dropping out,
Yep.
which, it depends where you look. You look at Sporting News with our one, Kafusi isn't there. I got him on the fringe, whereas you go to Fox Sports and they got Kafusi starting, and then it's really quite difficult to gauge with some of those forwards. It seems to be like you got Kafusi, Hazelton, Hamlin, ULA, and Hamlin ULA really has to have a big year too because it's a contract year for him. These three guys are really interchangeable, and I'd almost put Rudolph in that boat, except Rudolph has more talent. It's just that he's not been able to put it together all the minutes. So you got like four of these guys that you could legitimately say won't make the 17. They'll be on the 18th man spot, right?
Yeah, 100%. So it's a great problem to have, but when you've got an elite product like Adam Fanua-Blake, if I'm Craig Fitzgibbon, I'm protecting him when you got great options.
Yeah, and with that type of battle with those middle forwards, it means that you're always going to have some quality guys on the bench. It is probably a little bit of a risk if you've got, say, a Burns on the bench plus a Talakai and then only two front rowers, because a lot of the time the Sharks have had three front rowers. And I say risk to the Sharkies, but it's in a good way for Fanua-Blake. Like, he might actually see a few minutes extra if they run with that. And I think because Billy Burns was so good last year and actually, kept Nikora on the bench and got to start, that they might actually opt for Billy Burns, and definitely Talakai is going to be there for his utility value, and also just because he's earned that spot, I guess. So maybe it's only two front rows on the bench, which is unusual compared to a lot of Fitzgibbon 17s. Normally there's sort of three, and that might open up some minutes as well. But, then it's how do they play them? Do they move Calhoun from 13 to front row and accommodate Burns going into a lock position, or how does that actually play out?
I know we're going to get to Nicker in a sec. What's your take on Billy Burns for this year? Full disclosure, I don't have one because I don't know.
My take on Billy Burns is I know for a fact that they love him internally at Cronulla. I know that they love him, and I've always liked him. To me, he's almost got a little bit of Nikora quality in him, where he's got that X factor. And it is a pack that's been a very blue-collar workman-like pack for a long time that struggles to have that X-factor guy. Even a Teague Wilton was meant to be that because he was a bit of a good hole-running edge-back rower try scorer in the lower grades. And that started to come to fruition in his first grade, but it disappeared. He's not scoring tries and he's not hitting holes now. So again, they've just got so much pressure to have that X-factor. And Nikora has been that and has almost been solely that for them. But now you got Billy Burns come in where, I went to the Roosters Sharks game and took my kids to their first game last year, and the Roosters got beaten by the Sharks comprehensively. And the one that broke the Roosters back was Billy Burns scoring with like 15 minutes to go out of nothing, right in the middle of the field, just stepping through the ruck, going past some tight defenders, reaching out and getting across the line. And they don't have many guys that can do that in their pack. So I actually think, if I were to guess, that they think they need Burns. They need him. And it's hard because how do you fit him in? I will be completely outrageous here, Chris, and say they will not do this, but I would seriously consider dropping Teague Wilton and having a Burns and Nikora edge back rowers, because to me, that gives you two attacking back rowers on either side, two good options, two guys that Hynes can work with on either side of the ruck, and they're both great hole runners and X factors. And Wilton could have been that, but I just think that he's got enough opportunity now where he's just not doing it.
I think you're right in that they won't do it. I don't mind it. It gives options.
Yeah, and I reckon that they need it. But as far as where I think that they will go, I think Burns will be on the bench. I've seen people say that Burns will start, but I just can't. To me, Nikora was hurt before his suspension, which people forget.
Definitely.
And then he was playing through that a little bit, and then he got suspended. And then to me, it was like Fitzy saying, look, we've already gone 3 weeks with him suspended and out, another month before that where he's sort of dragging a little bit. Let's just share the minutes because we believe in Billy as well, and that's what I sort of saw it at. I didn't see it as Burns winning the role. And Nikora is on 700k plus a year. He's been one of the premier back rowers for a while. I can't see Burns unseating him just on what happened last year. Now, if they both had very different preseasons, then maybe, but I haven't heard that. So to me, Nikora starts, Burns comes off the bench.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Let's talk about Nikora in a bit more detail. He actually had an injury game last year, so his average goes from 58, which is the worst that he's had in several years, to a 61 again. And the big thing for Nikora, I think, last year, and maybe something Fitzgibbon saw in real life, is that his base stats went from 39 SuperCoach points a game to 45. From 45 to 39, I should say.
Yeah, okay.
So he went down 6 points a game, and you could visibly see it in his work. He was still hitting his lines really well, but he wasn't taking maybe the hit-ups that he used to in the middle of the ruck, which I think is important, and his work rate was just down. Now, that's a big issue for him in SuperCoach. It also means, though, at 570,000, it's one of the cheaper price points that Nikora has been in some time. He hasn't actually scored this badly since 2021, to put it in perspective.
Jeez.
Hasn't started this cheap since 2021. I was kind of keen on him as a bit of a value buy, but at the same time, there is that Billy Burns looming large over him, and even if he starts and Billy Burns is on the bench, does Burns have to then get some minutes on the edge? Does Nikora get capped at 60 minutes a game? So, I mean, we're kind of talking about it already, but I'll flip it over to you. I'm interested in your view, not just Burns being in the side like we're talking about, but how can they use him? Like, if he's on the bench, is there a way that they could get him into the middle instead of taking off Nikora, or is it just foregone conclusion he's going to take Nikora's minutes?
I think he's going to take his minutes. Nikora's only 28. I just don't know how he'll come back. I haven't heard or seen anything from the limited Sharks preseason I've been watching this year that suggests that Nikora is not, if anything, back to his best, which when he's at his best, obviously he's a test player. He's fantastic. But I don't see a world where long term Billy Burns starts and Nikora sits on the bench. I can see a high chance that Nikora starts, Billy Burns stays on the bench till the 60th minute.
Yep. Yeah, that's probably what I would guess as well. I mean, I guess the other thing too is that T. Wilton hasn't been as durable, he's also been suspended a few times as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that could happen during season, but it's not going to help anyone for round one for the SuperCoach team. So, look, if you think that Nikora is going to get 80 minutes, I think his value, I think he's an option. To put in perspective, in the first 9 rounds last season, Nikora scored 6 tries. For the rest of the season, he scored 1. And that is how Nikora runs. He has these try-scoring runs, and then he has these try-scoring droughts. Always comes out pretty good at the end of the year. Probably scored a few tries less than what he normally does. So there could be some value there, but he has to play 80 minutes. If we find out he plays 80 minutes for sure before round 1, he's an option. If there's any doubt, then it makes it really hard. We spoke about Wilton, though. He's been a rising gun for 3 years, mate. But for 3 years, he's actually gone downhill. So quite surprising. I really liked him when he came in. And then I gradually started to become a non-believer in Teague. But I know there's a lot of Sharks fans that are big believers still. He has gone 60 points, 56 points, 54 points the last 3 years in a row in SuperCoach. It's not a good trajectory. And I do think that the SuperCoach trajectory mimics real life. I don't think that he has stepped up to the point of having a mortgage on that position. I do think that when he came into grade maybe 5 years ago, that a lot of fans and also Fitzgibbon and the Sharkies thought he was going to be a long-term starting back rower and a bit of a semi-star. And he's done good work. Certainly his base in SuperCoach at 51 points a game is solid, but it's just not been the versatility, the X factor, the hole running, the try scoring, the attack, and especially like the offloads that what you would expect from someone like him. And I think that he did show early in his career coming through the grades. So, I mean, what do you make of Wilton? Because I'm really torn. I just don't know. And to me, he's worse than what he was 3 years ago in the NRL.
I don't know if he's worse than he was 3 years ago, but I certainly don't, as a fan, and then also just as a journalist watching the game, I don't expect X factor from Teague Wilton. There certainly was a time, but he is, I think, his position in Cronulla is as a toiler, and that has negative connotations, but he gets a team to a spot on the park. I know he can run a hole, but I just don't see it that much on the left. I think they'll use Iro instead of him. They use him as a decoy more than often. Or if they're not going to go Iro, they're going to go Kennedy out the back. I think that's his role to play. So I can't see him having a huge breakout, like in terms of line breaks. It's definitely not try assists. Even though they have changed the rules on that, I get that. I just think T. Gordon is exactly what he says on the packaging. He'll do his runs, he'll make his tackles. He is a good defender. He sometimes gets hung out to dry by people inside. I don't think there's anything flashy. He's just a workman-like second rower.
It's almost a bit of a shame. Like we talked about Kennedy's fitness side and how that complements what they've got, and sometimes teams need that. It's almost a bit of a shame for Wilton that he is in that Sharks pack and forward rotation, because I do think in other teams he would fit really well as a 13, as like a hard-working 13.
Yeah.
Like a Jack DeBellin sort of comes to mind to me as a sort of a comparison. I think he could do that role really well. But obviously at the Sharks, they've got a lot of those guys, and they certainly got no room at 13 for him, and he kind of has to be on that edge. So, but it goes to the point that I was making at the start of the show, and also to why I think Nikora and Burns are so important to them, that they've just got so many guys that are really good workers and really solid players, but they're very meat and potatoes, but they're all like that almost. They don't really have a lot of differentiation in their play, in their forward pack, and Wilton kind of fits into that. For SuperCoach, I could not go near him. I don't think you're going to get any better. You'll probably just get the same, and the same is not really gun status or good enough scoring. But I tell you, two of the favourite spots in Cronulla for me, always as a fan, has always been the wings. They've just always had wingers that I've just really liked, even if you go back to, the slowest winger in history in Covell. Like it's. Yeah, Luke could run down the sideline for about 18 minutes and still not get to the try line.
I was going to say, run's a bit strong, but yeah.
I've always loved their wingers for whatever reason. And, Katoa and Mulatalo, I've really enjoyed watching. They're exciting, and they're also good for SuperCoach at times on runs as well. Now they've got Katoa and Stone Street there. And I do think because of the amount of tries that the Sharks score, one of them is going to benefit. Stone Street is 496,000, Katoa's 547. They're right around that mid-range category. Both of them are a pod status point of difference players. Not many people are going to own them. But two very different players, right? Because Stone Street has a really low work rate. Like he's probably going to give you around a mid-20s type of base, raw base. And he doesn't get a lot of tackle breaks or offloads or anything. Whereas Katoa is a huge tackle breaker with his hit-ups when he runs. He's got 42 base power points per game just in his SuperCoach scoring before he scores tries. Both of them are try scorers, but Stone Street's seen himself be a SuperCoach option when he's been scoring at his best. And when you have a look at it, like in 2024, Stone Street had 5 games and he scored 8 tries in those 5 games. Like it was awesome. His try scoring rate went down a little bit. 4 out of 11 games he scored tries in, but all of them were doubles. So the 4 games out of the 11 last year that he scored tries in, it was a double in every game. He is a very noted try scorer. I'm sort of going to go the way of Wilton a little bit with Stoney. I was very excited for him coming through the grades, and I think that he showed a lot of excitement in 2024 with his try scoring prowess. And I had high expectations of him last year, and I don't think he quite met them. Now that he's got that role until probably June at least, do you see Stone Street being able to improve on last season? I actually think that he can. I'm just not sure that he can improve enough. And if so, is Katoa more of an option?
So if we're using Mulatalo as the yardstick, I think
yes,
Mulatalo is an international, almost a Queenslander. I don't know if he will reach those heights, but I think Stone Street, what was it? 8 tries, 11 games, but all doubles. I think he can definitely continue on with that in a positive fashion. My concern will be, as we spoke about with Iro, that I think the left side is really the stronger side for the Sharks in 2026. Katoa's going to get a lot more ball and just fantastic coming off the line. That's been a real strength of Cronulla with their wingers over the past few years. Stone Street obviously not as strong as Mulatalo, taking the ball back into the fence. Katoa, fantastic. So if I had to pick or choose one of them, I think it'll always be Katoa.
Yeah, I actually say Katoa is a little bit of a pod option. He's a bit expensive at 547,000. I think if it was closer to 400s, which he will get to in a price point at some point of the year, I would be on him for round 1. The issue is that price point is just a bit too high. But I would not be surprised if he ends up with more runs, because Mulatalo does take more runs in general play than what Stone Street will, and definitely more usage and more tries. Because, again, I agree with your point that I do think they're going to favour that side for him, and that's going to be a big deal. It also is going to be a big deal for Jesse Ramian, who we're going to talk about as well before we go on to the last few players in the cheapie category. Jesse Ramian, I think a lot of people have jumped on in SuperCoach, Chris, because the new point scoring favours centres, because previously they would get like a try contribution or last touch stat rather than a try assist and line break assist, whereas now that's going to turn into a full assist. He only had one of those last year, believe it or not. Only had like one shuffle on for a try scorer, which is quite crazy. So the argument with him is not that he was underscored last year. Your argument, if you want to start with him at 502,000, is that Jesse Ramian is going to have a contract year type season. And he's got a really low base to improve on because his attack last year was terrible. He had 3 tries all year. In 2024, he had 6. And in 2023, he actually had 11 tries. His attack last season, 1 try assist, 2 line break assists, and 1 try contribution last touch. So realistically, his attack was nowhere. Like, most forwards have more attack than what he had last year. Now, the argument's going to be, well, the only way's up. It is a contract year. He's going to double those attacking stats and be like 100K plus in value in SuperCoach. But the other argument that I really struggle with myself internally is that I haven't been a Ramian fan for a while. And the argument is that that's just Jesse Ramian. He's not there for his attack. They're not going to hit him for much attack. In fact, it could be even less this year they hit him for. And that might just be him. And if that is, it's a humongous waste in SuperCoach to have him in round 1.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you were to go, can Jesse Ramian stand up his opposing defender, remembering that center's like the one position where you're one-on-one, can he stand up his defender and get around him like a Katoni Staggs could, who's elite, but stay with me? The answer's no. KL Iro, of course, not a problem. Also, don't love Ramian's offload. He's a perfectly serviceable center. He does a good job, but he's also not the youngest player. Like, when he came back from the Knights, I thought that was a great reacquisition, and he's been a great servant for Cronulla, but he's certainly not the dominant center at the Sharks anymore.
No, and I've got to stay away from him in SuperCoach. You might get lucky, guys and girls. You might start him and he might carve up the Gold Coast round 1, and that's
100%.
all potential in the world. But I just don't think he's going to be consistent. And even in a contract year like this, I just don't see him getting enough usage and enough ball out there. And even then, what's he going to do with it? And I'll finish off by a SuperCoach memory burnt in my mind from about 3 years ago, or it might have been 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago when I went on a bit of a run and I was top 5 for a long time in that business end. I actually had a Ramian pod going, and I remember vividly him playing the Cowboys, and he made this great line break all by himself and went through, used all this power, beat like 3 defenders, and he got to the fullback, and all he had to do was pass to the support player, and he went and just slipped straight out of his hands, straight to the ground. Didn't even fumble it, just slipped out of his hands, and he did that phantom pass with nothing. And it was just like, mate, you are very Jesse Ramian, and that is him. Like, so he didn't get the line break counted.
Yep, good.
It's just an error. So, that's unfortunately, that's him. He's got those errors in his game, and he's just not as polished now as what he perhaps might have been 5 or 6 years ago even. We're going to talk mids and cheapies to finish off the pod, Chris. Before we do, I just need to let the audience know about the great sponsor of the Allstars podcast in oneworldcourier.com.au. You can go jump on oneworldcourier.com.au today if you have any shipping needs, or the business that you work for or own has any particular, whether it's pallets or envelopes that you want to send, they can do it all. All you do is go to the website, create a free account today, and when it says, where did you hear about us, put NRL Allstars podcast. Then they'll give you a great rate card to start with, and you start shipping. You just pop in exactly what you want to ship and where it's going. They'll show you all the different providers that you can use. You pick whichever one you want, and then they take care of it all for you. It's really simple. It's a great service, and they're great supporters of the show. So do go and jump on them if you have any freight or shipping needs. Chris, we have mids and cheapies to talk about, and these are the guys that potentially present value and are going to make some money. And we have started to talk about some of them. Braden Trindle is $417,000. Now, for a leading halfback, that is cheap money in SuperCoach, but can he make 100K plus and actually be worth the investment? Can he actually have some consistent games? I'm just going to go on a limb here and remind everyone that I don't normally say in SuperCoach, you can't get this player. Don't do it. Because I always think that everyone needs to make their own decisions on players, and there's some positive in everyone, all right? So sometimes it works out. But Trindle is going to be one of those exceptions where I say it's not going to work out. And the reason being is I'm just going to read out some of his numbers, okay? In 80-minute games, he has several scores in the teens. 15 points round 4 last year, 17 points the next week. Then you go to round 8. He actually played 89 minutes versus the Tigers. 89 minutes versus the Tigers. If you knew about this beforehand as a SuperCoacher and you had Trindle, you'd be like, I'm getting 150 points in 89 minutes. This is the best matchup. He's going to get 9 minutes of extra time, 7 SuperCoach points. It is unbelievable how bad some of his scoring can be. And then you go and look at it and go, well, he's got no 100-plus scores for the year. How often does he go 60-plus? When does he give me a gun score? 13% of his games. And he played the whole season. He only missed the last game of the season. He just cannot go well in SuperCoach. 43-point average. He was 57 the year before, 43 the year before. I can see people saying, oh, but that 57, Barnesy, it's 14 points below. He could have 14 points of value. He had kicks in that year, and he just had a good run. If you think that he can do that again, okay. The biggest problem with him is that in the halfback spot in particular, you're going to have lots of cheapies to choose from that are base price, like a Sanders. Even at 5'8", you've got to have Pezzett there as a starting 5'8" at the Eels. And then you're going to forego a gun like a Nico Hynes or a Nathan Cleary to go cheap price on a Trindle that's going to score 20% of the average that they're going to do. It just, you can't do it. So I'm ruling Trindle out. I've absolutely run him over with a truck, Chris. But look, in real life, I think he can provide some good things for the Sharkies, although it's patchy. But he's just so inconsistent.
It's borderline personal, back fence Barnesy. I mean, the numbers don't lie. That's the great thing about SuperCoach. You can look at it and, thank you for bringing up that West Tigers game. That was traumatic. I mean, that's what it is. As you said, there are plenty of other options which are more cost effective for SuperCoach at least.
His overall base, just for those playing at home, was 13 points a game. So in his tackles and runs made, he was scoring 13 points a game. And some of that as well because he was missing so many tackles too. So, yeah. I mean, it's just, you can't do it. Then we've got a couple of guys that I do think present value that are very similar to finish off on. Colquhoun, 332,000, and Toby Rudolph, 330,000. Two guys that could play similar roles, but Colquhoun is a safe one. I've got Colquhoun in my side at the moment. Now, only 2 games he played last year that had meaningful minutes, where he played 49 and 58 minutes, and he had 49-point average for those. And that's pretty much what I think that he can do. I think that you're going to get 50 to 55 minutes and 50 to 55 points out of him. And that's going to be for about the first 2 months of the season, which is plenty of time to make a lot of cash on his price point. He does have a new contract, Chris. I was really surprised when they re-signed him because I thought they would. But they have him through 2030.
Yeah.
It's a real show of faith that he's going to be the future of that forward pack. And they really rate him internally at the Sharkies. So when you give someone that contract and that belief, I have to also question whether his role will even change that much. McInnes is older. He's coming off a serious injury. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't start for the first 4 or 5 weeks after he returns. And even if he does then, is Colquhoun equipped enough to go straight to the front row rotation and to unseat that second front rower next to Fanua Blake? I mean, it's interesting how they're going to use him. Now they've got that contract on board and everything. But to me, for SuperCoach for round 1, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It might take a little while to make a lot of money because he's not going to score tries or anything, but his PPM's great. 50 to 55 seems reasonable as an expectation, and the Sharks love him.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we know is he's going to get minutes. And I think you're entirely right that when McInnes does come back, considering his age, at the archaic, only 32 years old, and just the nature of his injury, I don't see him playing 4 minutes. I do think this will be the first year of the Colquhoun era. So if you can get him cheap, he's going to get the opportunity. He just seems like a good investment. As you said, the Sharks really believe in him. You don't give out monster contracts like that just for fun.
No, you don't. Priced at a 34 average off last year. He should be at least 15 points undervalued. So it's pretty easy to start with him at your front row forward spot. Off to finish off on is a lot more trickier though. 30K is a nice price. He started the last 3 games of last year, and over those last 3 starts, he went 47 minutes per game and 51 points per game. If he did that again, there's a good chance that he's 10 to 15 points unders for SuperCoach, which is okay. I think the thing with Rudolph is he's never been able to stay on the park and earn a consistent role. I certainly think over the last few years, if you went back 3 years ago, he was earmarked as a starter and going to be a good starter, potential, representative level type of guy. And he just hasn't quite come through due to a lot of injuries that have occurred. Now, it's always, can this be the year? But when you look at it, the last 3 years, he's got 14 games played, 18 games played, 14 games played. He's coming off his lowest minutes of his career at 32. And that's gone down every single year. So if you go back to 2021, he was playing 56 minutes a game, scoring 51 points per game. I think that's what the Sharks hope and thought that he would be, but it just hasn't happened. Can he be that guy? Can he be that 50s minutes type of front rower that could start at front row for them and actually get through enough games in the season?
It didn't seem like Cronulla were that keen on him starting games and being out there, apart from in the second half. Is there such thing as an impact front row? I don't know. I mean, Spencer Linier is, but I just don't see Toby getting the majority of the rotation minutes in the front row. I love Toby Rudolph. When he walked away from that Warriors deal, it's like, this is great. He's going to be the star. As you said, weird injuries as well, which have taken him out. I don't know how many minutes he's going to get. He's got try scoring ability. Like he busts through the middle. He makes tackles. He's a great player, but is he going to play that much? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the big question. And it's why that you've probably got to steer clear in SuperCoach until you sort of see how the minutes play out. Even if he gets named as a starter, if they've got a 3 front row bench, then it's a bit hard to see how he gets the minutes. But I will just say to finish up on the players that there has to be someone in this crop of the Hemlin ULAs, the Rudolphs, the Hazeltons, the Kafusis even, that steps up to be that second consistent front rower. Like, that's the thing missing in that pack. They're all good, decent role-playing players in their own right. One of them has got to be the secondary guy. That secondary guy could end up a minutes beneficiary. And he's only got 34 minutes to baseline against Toby Rudolph. That's all he played last year. 32 minutes, which is really low. So if he starts, he's got to get an extra 10 minutes a game. And one thing that's been consistent with him is that his PPM's always been around 1 point per minute output, which is really good for him. And in real life, he's a worker and he's going to do that. So I'll go out and be positive. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a career Sharks year for Toby Rudolph. But for SuperCoach, it's too much of a risk to start with him. You need to see him doing it first and see that he's healthy. But I've always really liked him, so I'm rooting for him. But that is everybody to talk about as far as players, Chris, and that is the podcast. Thank you very much for jumping on. It was great to talk your Sharkies with you.
I'm always happy to talk Sharks, especially when it's in such a positive manner as well. This is a nice change. It's usually me apologising for them.
Well, you get your second premiership this year. You won't have to apologise for anything, so don't worry about it. Look, Chris is the head of content for Sporting News Australia. I write there as well, so make sure you go and jump on there and read the articles. They are fantastic. And for this show, make sure you jump on YouTube, iTunes and Spotify and subscribe so you get all the episodes straight away. And you can jump on social media and follow us too to be up to date with all the current news. But until then, we've got more team previews coming this week. Enjoy going through them and tinkering with your SuperCoach sides. We've got some great trials coming up this weekend. Can't wait to watch them. We'll be back again real soon with another episode to talk more footy again.
You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid.